The Brotherhood of the Unspoken, a history of pause culture and hip-hop masculinity. Harlem, Boston, and the Code of Silence. In 1934, Harlem and Boston, two vibrant black communities, were both battling external oppression and internal confusion. Harlem was alive with jazz, poetry, and politics, while Boston's South End was filled with a rising black intellectual class trying to find its place in a segregated North. Hidden beneath the music and speeches, however, was a growing subculture of men who felt alienated not because of their skin, but because of their desire. These men, many of them artistic, emotional, and intelligent, found themselves having to hide who they were to survive. Out of necessity, they developed coded language to protect themselves from social and physical violence. Phrases like "pause" or "that ain't me" became veiled tools to redirect suspicion. It wasn't about shame. It was about survival in a culture that equated queerness with weakness. This underground communication formed what some would later mythologize as the Brotherhood of the Unspoken. It was never an official group, but rather a shared sense of caution, secrecy, and the longing to be oneself in a world that demanded the opposite. Boston men who came to Harlem on jazz tour would bring new slang back up north, helping cement a dual-city dialect of coded denial. As jazz clubs in Roxbury and Harlem pulsed into the early morning, behind-the-scenes men formed quiet networks of solidarity. There was no manifesto, just a glance, a nod, a whispered phrase like "hold it" or "cut that out," which evolved into "pause." It meant "don't let them get the wrong idea." It meant "I'm not that kind of man, even if I am." But it was also deeply ironic. Many of the men using pause were in fact queer, but their lives were defined by performance. They could write love poems to other men under female pseudonyms, sing blues songs about loss that actually meant forbidden love, and still get cheers from crowds who didn't know the subtext. This double life was exhausting, and it planted the seed for generations of emotional disassociation. The Brotherhood didn't free them, it chained them in coded language. Yet for decades, this phraseology lived quietly in black speech, until hip-hop came along and put it on loudspeakers. What was once a whisper became a defense mechanism baked into culture. From secret slang to studio talk. The 1980s and 1990s saw the rise of hip-hop as the dominant voice of black youth culture, and with it came the resurrection of old codes. While artists were sampling James Brown and Biggie, they were also sampling linguistic habits born from silence and survival. Terms like pause and no homo weren't invented by rap, but rap gave them power. As hip-hop fought to define masculinity, strength, and street credibility, any hint of softness or perceived femininity became suspect. So rappers armed themselves with denials before anyone could ask questions. No homo wasn't just a joke, it was a shield. Cameron and Mace, Harlem-born, inherited the legacy of the Brotherhood myth, even if they didn't know it. Cameron's famous use of pink, a color once seen as taboo for real men, confused audiences. Was he reclaiming fashion or trolling the culture? Either way, his casual, constant use of "no homo" made it seem like he needed to reassert his straightness every few sentences. Mace, too, vacillated between preacher, player, and poet, never letting his public image stray too far from hetero comfort. Together, they embedded pause and no homo into the hip-hop lexicon, forever tying it to Harlem, to myth, and to masculinity in crisis. This wasn't isolated. Across the industry, rappers felt the pressure to navigate a tightrope between emotional honesty and hypermasculine expectations. Any deviation was met with suspicion. To say "I love you" to a male friend required a pause. To talk about fashion, feelings, or therapy meant you had to first declare your straightness. The language of denial became cultural default. But beneath it all, the myth of the Brotherhood lingered. An imaginary elite circle of men in hip-hop who were secretly gay and hiding in plain sight. Conspiracies, performances, and the industry's double standard. As the 2000s turned into the 2010s, online culture and conspiracy theories magnified the Brotherhood myth to absurd proportions. Forums and YouTube channels began claiming that famous rappers were part of a gay secret society controlling the industry. They pointed fingers at everyone from LL Cool J to Lil Wayne, suggesting that mentorship, fashion, or even close male friendships were signs of hidden identity. In reality, what they were exposing was their own fear of men who didn't conform. These conspiracy theories didn't exist in a vacuum. They were born from decades of coded masculinity. Lil Wayne, for example, kissed his mentor Birdman on the lips, a moment that set the internet on fire. But instead of seeing it as a complex expression of loyalty or family, it was spun into suspicion. Wayne's eccentric fashion and emotionally vulnerable lyrics made him a target. Despite his success and talent, he constantly had to reaffirm his realness through aggressive lyrics and public beefs. The language of hip-hop had become a trap, forcing artists to either lie or shout their straightness over every beat. Meanwhile, LL Cool J, whose muscular physique and love ballads once made him a sex symbol, became the subject of rumors simply for not being angry all the time. The myth of the brotherhood turned kindness into code and sensitivity into sin. Rappers had to look hard, act tough, and avoid any gesture that could be read as soft. The performative masculinity demanded by the industry created a toxic environment, not just for queer artists, but for all men trying to be whole. And behind it all, Pause and No Homo lurked, reminders of the fear to be fully seen. The new generation breaks the code. By the 2020s, a new generation of rappers began to challenge everything the brotherhood myth stood for. Artists like Lil Nas X and Tyler, the creator, openly explored queer identity, shattering the idea that hip-hop had to be homophobic. Lil Nas X twerked with demons and kissed men on national television, unapologetically. Tyler, once known for homophobic slurs in his lyrics, publicly explored his own attraction to men with humor, honesty, and flair. They weren't just breaking the code, they were setting it on fire. Their success showed that authenticity could win, even in an industry built on performance. Other artists blurred the lines without explicitly naming their identities. Drake, often criticized for being too emotional, built a career off vulnerability. He normalized crying, apologizing, and expressing love, even if he occasionally still used pause to laugh off intimacy. Rod Wave poured his pain into soulful tracks, redefining what black male expression could sound like. Trippie Redd, Lil Pump, and even controversial figures like Tekashi 669, INI, all played with flamboyant aesthetics that once would have been taboo. The internet debated their identities, often using brotherhood rhetoric, but they kept making music. And still, the echoes of the old codes remain. Pause hasn't fully disappeared, and No Homo still shows up in locker rooms and tracks. But the world is different now. There are more voices, more truths, and more room to be complicated. As the culture changes, so does the language. The brotherhood of the unspoken, though never real, helped reveal a very real problem: masculinity built on fear, secrecy, and denial.
You know why the fuck I did Pink? I did Pink because I thought nobody else would do Pink. I thought niggas would be like, Cam is a homo. Nobody rides Pink. Can't fuck Pink. A lot of y'all niggas wear Pink got a lot of fucking nerve, man.